Hi folks, welcome to RJA Impact. Today I'm going to be summarising the closing arguments in the Ruben Flores case. As a reminder, Ruben Flores is Paul Flores' father and he's been accused of helping his son Paul cover up the crime of the murder of Kristin Smart, who went missing over 26 years ago. The closing arguments from the prosecution follow very similar lines to that of Paul Flores. The prosecutor even used the same PowerPoint presentation to present the facts. The reason for this is that, as prosecuting DA Christopher Puvrell puts it, to be an accomplice in covering up a crime, then there has to be a crime, and so Puvrell needs to convince the jury that a crime has been committed, so he goes through the materials relating to Paul Flores too. This clearly makes the conviction of Ruben harder than that of Paul, because not only does the jury first have to be convinced that Paul committed murder, but on top of that, the fact that Ruben helped cover it up. So we got to it, and DA Puvrell was on the stand first, making the same emotional points to the jury as he did in the Paul Flores case. 1,370 Sundays is the number elapsed that the Smart family have waited for their daughter to call, and this is the powerful way Puvrell points to the length of time since Kristin went missing. Puvrell made the following points. Paul called his father immediately after Detective Kennedy spoke to him, which Puvrell said was a warning call. Tellingly, he didn't call 911 because that wasn't the sort of help Paul needed on the nights Kristin went missing. You heard that there was a smorgasbord of Kristin Smart's paraphernalia located in Ruben's bedroom in 2020. Dozens and dozens of items relating to Kristin Smart. Not a folder in the attic, not a filing cabinet in the garage, in his bedroom. This was Ruben Flores' trophy room, as Puvrell said. The items found in his bedroom were not hate mail like the defence claims. The items included Smart's missing posters, an essay to honour Smart's memory, and a copy of the Tribune newspaper from 2014, with a headline that the case was back on the country's radar. Also found in Ruben Flores' bedroom was what resembled a to-do list with the phrase "dig the yard" at the top. And the jury was shown a photo of a drawer with all the paraphernalia in it. He went on to speak about the staining in the backyard in digs that were under Ruben's decking that also tested positive for blood and were the same size as a human body, and that Ruben and Paul guided Paul's girlfriend away from and didn't let a plumber near. You heard, said Puvrell talking to the jury, that Ruben Flores would refer to Kristin Smart as a dirty slut. He admitted to committing a felony himself, Puvrell said, and this was in response to seeing the names of his ex-wife and her boyfriend on a warrant. Flores said, "They haven't committed no felonies," and after a pause adding, "only me." And jurors had actually heard an audio recording of this exchange. This was all quite a bit quicker than the Paul Flores summing up by Puvrell, and he concluded by saying, "The only truthful verdict is one finding Ruben Flores guilty of helping his son conceal a murder." And things were done by about 11 a.m. We then had Harold Messick standing up for Ruben. Ruben's defence attorney began his arguments by asking the jury if they got all the answers they needed, or if they still had some more questions than answers. "That wouldn't be surprising," he said. "Kristin Smart is still missing and we don't have answers." Now, as a reminder, jurors throughout the trial have been allowed to present questions to the prosecutors and defence which have been asked in court. To say that there may be more questions they need answers to is quite a good way, in my opinion, for the defence to raise doubts in the juror's mind. He then flatters the jury. "This has been the longest trial I've ever been involved in. You all showed up every day ready to rock. You're real warriors in my mind. You've earned mine and my client's respect for that." He goes on, "You guys have the ultimate authority to decide what all of this means. My client's absolutely innocent, hasn't done a thing, hasn't dug a grave in his life." I think this case screams reasonable doubt. It starts with no body, and without a body we can't honestly be sure that Kristin Smart is dead. I know it's the most likely conclusion, but if you can conclude that it's reasonable she's not dead, then it's reasonable she's alive. He said that trial by jury is, in quotes, the spinal cord of democracy. and that the jurors are the finders of fact. He said that Ruben Flores has a generous and kind mind, despite how he was portrayed by the prosecution. The state has done a great job of demonising Paul Flores and my client. These aren't evil people. This man especially is not an evil person. He's 81 years old, never been charged with a crime in his life. He goes on about Ruben. This whole thing is completely foreign to him. He's a good man, a grandfather, a husband, a former Redondo police officer, a member of the Elks. He's a generous, kind man. He's not an evil man, no matter how he's been portrayed. Also, on Paul on the night of Kristin's disappearance, there wasn't a 911 call because there was no reason for one. He went home, threw up, and slept off his hangover. Paul Flores did a good deed, helping her off the ground and helping her to get home. He gets her within sight of a dorm. You could see a dorm from where they parted. Then he goes to bed. He's drunk, throws up, has to sleep off his hangover, he repeated. Sunday morning, he calls his dad, says, "I know you're working tomorrow because it's double time. How about picking me up so that I can come home and work on my truck?" He's selling it, Messick says. Don't start your analysis from the perspective that he's evil. Starts from the perspective that he's innocent. On Kristin, he says, she lied all the time, and he told jurors to read the buckle up buttercup letter that Denise Smart's mother wrote her daughter in the weeks before she disappeared. You know, there's evidence to support a reasonable inference that Kristin Smart is just missing. She had a habit of disappearing. She lied frequently. She only had one real friend at Cal Poly. The other girls didn't like her because she was boy crazy, Messick says. And looking at the jury, Messick says, you will be forced to use your imagination for the prosecution's theory to make sense. Don't do the state's work for them. They shouldn't have to fill in the blanks themselves because the prosecution's job is to present evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. This miniseries lasted for 3 months, 26 years in development. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent on investigations, sting operations, wiretaps, 10,000 phone intercepts in 1 month, superdogs with cool names like Choya and Annie. He goes on to say that Ruben Flores was never guarding his deck at any point. When he directed Angie away from the deck, it was to avoid her stepping in dog poop, and his roommate was allowed under the decks, just not under the house. On the staining and the soil under the decking, he says he noted that David Carter, a human decomposition expert, was called by the defence and said the staining could be lamellae, a soil pattern common on the Central Coast in sand with high iron. The only conclusion Cindy Arrington drew when I confronted her about the bathtub ring was that's not a bathtub ring. If you've ever drained a bathtub, it leaves a nice even ring around the bathtub. That's not what this was. These are not human decomposition stains. We have zero evidence in this case, let alone overwhelming, he said. On the blood test, the HemDirect test, it does cross-react with ferrets, which I know were illegal in California in 1996. I don't know if it's ferret blood. I don't know if it's higher primate blood. They used a test that's specifically invalid. The manufacturer said, don't use it. On friends, you heard from several witnesses, many of them friends of Kristin Smart. They weren't her friends in 1996. Kendra, she's here for one reason, to convict Paul and Ruben Flores. Steve, no respect at all for the truth. He just got up there and made stuff up. He was nowhere to be found early in the investigation. He also made the point that the friends here were all out for the reward. On the dogs. Let's talk about the dogs. I'm a dog lover. I've had a couple of dogs, but dogs can only find something that's there, right? This scent of death, hocus pocus. There's absolutely no scientific support for it. None. In all these excavations over the years, what did they find? Nothing. There was never a body for them to find. She's not been in touch with her family for 26 years, talking about Kristin. The likely conclusion is that she is dead, but if you don't know, that's certainly reasonable doubt. And again, the only evidence that Kristin Smart was in Paul Flores' room is the dog alert. But remember, this room was separately identified from all of the other rooms. the only room with crime scene tape. If the handlers got suspicion, dogs like to please their handlers. On the phone call, it's an innocent call. Come get me that I can have dinner at home. Paul had to take his stereo out of his truck so he could sell it. It had these speaker amps behind the seat, so you had to take the seats out and everything. It was a whole big production. And this is alluding to how Paul got his black eye, which he gave inconsistent testimony to over the years. On the admission by Ruben, what the prosecution says was Ruben Flores' admission to felonies was actually a slip of the tongue, something prosecutors rely on when they are desperate and have no physical evidence, Messick said. The state has not met their burden by any stretch of the imagination. It's your duty to render a not guilty verdict and render it quickly. A quick verdict would tell the state, when you want to bring a charge like this, bring us some real evidence. And in conclusion, I'd like you to find my client not guilty. I'd like you to say this is insufficient evidence and send us all home. The whole of his defence argument lasted 37 minutes. So then we had Pouvril on again for rebuttal, which is a right of the prosecution in these cases. And on the admission he said, "Good morning again. I wanted to start off with what I was waiting for, which was a reasonable explanation for Paul Flores' admission. All we got was that he was surprised." He wasn't surprised. It was a planned visit. He had a table ready out for detectives. On Paul Flores, counsel said that Paul Flores did a good deed. There's no chivalry in sexual violence. Do you think Rhonda Doe thought she did a good deed? Do you think Sarah Doe thought he did a good deed? And here's referring to the two witnesses who testified of their ordeal at the hands of Paul Flores when he AR'd them. Were all 50 witnesses using imagination? Were the dogs using imagination? He asks. It's so absurd to say that you need to use imagination. They clearly did not sit through the same 3-month trial that we all did. He points out that the expert witnesses called by the prosecution were in quotes the best in their field, while the defence experts' witnesses were unreliable. And in summary, I ask you for a truthful verdict that Ruben Flores is guilty of accessory to murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so the jury was sent out for deliberations at this point, and on some housekeeping matters, they started their deliberations at 1:43 p.m, so I understand, and the 3 alternate jurors that were remaining were asked to remain available to fill in until a verdict was actually returned. Now, we currently have both juries out, and nothing is going to happen until both juries have reached a verdict. All parties are going to be given 40 minutes notice to return to the courtroom, and then the verdicts will be read one after another. Messick at this point says Ruben Flores would like to waive his right to be present for anything further, short of the reading of the verdict, which is accepted by Judge O'Keefe. Apparently the reading of the verdict will not be recorded or broadcast. So that's it for now. I'll give you an update on the outcome of the verdict when they come in. If you don't want to miss that, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It's appreciated. If you hit the notification bell, then you'll get updated when this update or any other videos are published. Bye for now.